the internet lately, and apparently every single person who's ever been remotely mean to you is a narcissist. Every ex is a psychopath. Every boss who gave you a bad performance review is a sociopath. The internet has basically diagnosed half the population, and the other half are toxic and need to be cut off immediately. The internet is basically one giant, unlicensed, very angry psychiatrist, and it's handing out personality disorder diagnoses like Oprah handing out cars. You get a diagnosis, and you get a diagnosis. Everybody gets a diagnosis. Now don't get me wrong, some people genuinely are clinically diagnosable. Some people are genuinely dangerous. Some people should absolutely be avoided at all costs. But the internet has taken three very specific, very serious clinical terms and turned them into buzzwords that now just mean person I don't like. Your ex isn't a narcissist because he forgot your birthday. He might just be a bit selfish. He might just be bad at remembering dates. He might just be a bit crap. There's a Grand Canyon-sized chasm between he never did the washing up and he has a clinical personality disorder characterised by a grandiose sense of self-importance and a total lack of empathy. And look, I get it. When someone hurts you, really hurts you, it's comforting to have a label. It's validating to say, this person isn't just a bit crap, they have a pathology, they're broken, it wasn't my fault. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes the person is just a bit crap, a bit selfish, a bit immature. And calling them a psychopath doesn't help anyone. It dilutes the terms, it makes it harder for people genuinely dealing with a clinically dangerous individual to be taken seriously, and honestly, it just makes you sound like you've been spending too much time on TikTok. And here's the other thing, what if I told you that I recently stumbled across a podcast featuring a diagnosed psychopath who is now, wait for it, a life coach? A man who has the clinical diagnosis, who ticks all the boxes, who is by every measure a psychopath, and he spends his days helping people. He's self-aware, he's articulate, he's honest about his limitations, and he completely changed my view of what I thought a psychopath was. So today we're doing something radical. We're going to talk about what psychopaths, sociopaths and narcissists actually are. Clinically, diagnostically and psychologically. Not what TikTok says they are. Not what your mate Dave says they are after 3 pints. Not even what Hollywood says they are. What the actual science says. And we're going to do it with humour, with swearing, and with a healthy dose of please stop diagnosing your ex. I'm Jenny, 52, lifelong anxiety waiting for ADHD and autism assessments. I've been in relationships, 2 marriages, and I've met my fair share of difficult, selfish, manipulative people, but I'm also very aware that the internet has lost its collective mind when it comes to these terms. So let's sort it out. Grab a cuppa and maybe don't diagnose anyone while you're drinking it. Right, let's start with the basics. Psychopaths, sociopaths and narcissists are all part of what's called the Cluster B personality disorders. Think of Cluster B as the family reunion from hell. It's the dramatic, emotional, unpredictable branch of the personality disorder tree. These are the ones causing scenes at the buffet table, accusing you of stealing their inheritance, and then giving a heartfelt, tearful speech about how no one understands them, all in the space of about 10 minutes. Cluster B includes antisocial personality disorder. That's your psychopaths and sociopaths. They share a diagnosis, but they have different flavours, like 2 deeply unsettling varieties of the same dangerous ice cream. Then there's the narcissistic personality disorder. The narcissists, obviously. Borderline personality disorder, intense emotions, unstable relationships, and a profound fear of abandonment. And histrionic personality disorder, attention-seeking, dramatic, needs to be the centre of everything, like a theatre kid who never grew up and is now demanding you watch their one-person show about their cat. Now here's the crucial thing. All of these are legitimate, diagnosable mental health conditions. They're in the DSM-5, they're in the ICD-11, they're not just being a bit of a dick. You can't self-diagnose your ex with antisocial personality disorder because you forgot your birthday and then lied about it. That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. So, what makes someone qualify for a cluster B diagnosis? It's not one thing. It's not one bad day. It has to be a persistent, pervasive pattern of behaviour that causes significant distress or impairment in their life. We're talking years, not weeks. It has to affect multiple areas of their life: work, relationships, social functioning, their ability to just exist without causing chaos. And crucially, it can't be better explained by something else like substance abuse or another mental health condition, or just being a bit of a knobhead under extreme stress. The point is, these are serious, complex and relatively rare conditions. Antisocial personality disorder affects about 1 to 3% of the general population. Narcissistic personality disorder affects about 1%. That's it, 1%. So the next time TikTok tells you that everyone you've ever dated is the narcissist, remember, statistically, you'd have to date about 100 people to find one. You'd be exhausted. You'd have no time for anything else. You'd be a full-time dating machine with a spreadsheet and a support group, and you still might not find one. Now let's dig into each one separately, because they're not interchangeable and they're definitely not just synonyms for arsehole. Let's start with psychopaths. And I want to be very clear about something. A psychopath is not the same as someone who has psychosis. That's a common mix-up and it drives me up the wall. Psychosis means losing touch with reality, hallucinations, delusions, things like that. Psychopathy means something completely different. It's about personality, not perception. A psychopath knows exactly what reality is. They just don't care about it. They look at reality and go, yeah, I see it, don't care. Now what can you do for me? Psychopathy is characterised by a profound lack of empathy, a lack of guilt or remorse, shallow emotions and a grandiose sense of self-worth. And here's the really unsettling part. Psychopaths are often charming, very charming. They can be the most charismatic person in the room. That's part of the condition. They learn to mimic emotions they don't feel. They study you like a scientist studying a specimen. They learn what you want to see and they show it to you. And then they use that charm to manipulate you, to get what they want, to climb over you and leave you behind without a second thought. Your pain is irrelevant. Your tears are just data. Let me give you the core traits of psychopathy. Glibness and superficial charm. They can talk their way into or out of anything, and you'll thank them for it. A grandiose sense of self-worth. They genuinely believe they're better than everyone else, and they're not pretending. Pathological lying. They lie even when there's no reason to, just because they can, just to see if you'll believe them. Conning and manipulativeness. They see people as tools, as chess pieces, as objects to be used and discarded. Lack of remorse or guilt. They can hurt you deeply and sleep like a baby. Shallow effect. Their emotions are a mask, a performance, not a real experience. Callousness and a complete lack of empathy. They don't feel your pain. They don't care about your pain. Your pain is about as relevant to them as the weather in a country they'll never visit. And a parasitic lifestyle. They take and take and take and feel entitled to everything you have, and when you have nothing left, they move on. The clinical diagnosis for this is antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD. In the UK, the NHS uses the term personality disorder and specifically recognises dissocial personality disorder in the ICD-11, but psychopath is the term most people recognise, popularised by the Hare Psychopathy Checklist, which is a tool used in forensic settings to assess psychopathic traits. It's not just a quiz in a magazine. It's a serious, structured, 40-item clinical assessment conducted by a trained professional. It takes hours. It's not something you do on the toilet while you're scrolling Instagram. Here's the thing about psychopaths that makes them almost impossible to treat. They rarely seek treatment. Why would they? They don't think they have a problem. Everyone else has the problem. They're fine. You're the one who's too sensitive. This is called anosognosia, a lack of insight into their own condition. You can't fix someone who doesn't think they're broken. Now, are all psychopaths violent? No. Most psychopaths are not violent. This is the most important thing pop culture gets wrong. Most psychopaths are in boardrooms, not prisons. They're CEOs, not serial killers. They're charming, successful, and utterly ruthless. They'll destroy your career, your reputation, your sense of self, your entire life, but they won't lay a finger on you. They're emotional predators, not physical ones. And in some ways, that's more dangerous because you never see it coming. But here's where the story gets really interesting. I recently stumbled across a podcast featuring a man called Dr. Lewis Raymond Taylor. And Dr. Taylor is a diagnosed psychopath. Clinically diagnosed. He ticks all the boxes. He has the conditions. By every measure, he is a psychopath. And he is also a life coach. Let me say that again. A diagnosed psychopath is a life coach. He spends his days helping other people understand themselves, improve their lives, and become better versions of themselves. He has built a career, a successful, meaningful career, on helping people. When I first heard this, my entire framework for understanding psychopathy just cracked because everything pop culture had told me, everything Hollywood had shown me, every true crime documentary I'd ever watched said that psychopaths are monsters, cold, empty, remorseless monsters, that they're incapable of connection, that they're incapable of good, that they're just bad. And here was this man with the diagnosis being completely self-aware, completely articulate, completely honest about his limitations, and actively choosing to help people. Not because he feels their pain. He'll tell you he doesn't feel empathy the way most people do. He doesn't get that automatic, visceral, I feel what you feel response. But he's built a career on helping people anyway, because he's decided it's the right thing to do, because he's made a choice, because he's a human being working with his brain, not against it. That blew my mind. It genuinely did. Because it showed me that even the most stigmatised, most demonised, most feared mental health condition in the world doesn't have to define a person. Dr. Taylor is proof that a diagnosis is not a destiny, that a brain wired differently is still capable of choice, still capable of contribution, still capable of good. And that's not the narrative we're used to hearing. That's not the story pop culture tells, but it's true and it matters. Now let's talk about sociopaths. And here's the key difference. Psychopaths are genuinely understood to be born. Sociopaths are genuinely understood to be made. A psychopath's brain is wired differently from birth. They have a genetic predisposition. Differences in brain structure, particularly in the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, which are the bits that handle empathy, impulse control, and fear. It's neurological, it's in the wiring. A sociopath, on the other hand, is the product of environment. Trauma, abuse, neglect, chaotic upbringing, violence in the home, abandonment, extreme poverty. These things can shape a person into someone who lacks empathy, who sees the world as a threat, who learns that the only way to survive is to take what you need and not care who gets hurt. A sociopath wasn't born this way. A sociopath was taught this way by a world that failed them first. So what does a sociopath look like? They tend to be more impulsive and erratic than psychopaths. They're not the smooth, charming mastermind. They're the person who gets into fights, who loses control, whose life is often a mess of broken relationships and bad decisions. They can form attachments to certain people. A sociopath might genuinely love their mother or their dog or their child in a way a psychopath simply cannot. Their empathy is diminished, not absent. A psychopath's empathy is a flat line. A sociopath's empathy is patchy, selective, there but only for the people that they've decided matter. They have a sense of right and wrong, but it's distorted. Their moral compass points wherever they need it to point to justify their actions. Yes, I hurt you, but you deserved it. So psychopaths are cold, calculating, and born with a brain that doesn't feel. Sociopaths are hot-headed, chaotic, and shaped by a world that hurt them first. Neither is safe to be around in an intimate relationship. Both can destroy your life, but they're different. They feel different. They operate differently. And understanding that difference is the first step to protecting yourself from either of them. And neither of them is your ex who didn't text you back for 3 hours. I cannot stress this enough. I want this on a t-shirt. I want it on a billboard. I want it tattooed on the forehead of every armchair psychologist on TikTok. Your ex who didn't text you back is not a psychopath. He's just not that into you. And that's a different problem entirely. Now we come to the internet's favourite diagnosis. Narcissist. Narcissistic Personality Disorder. NPD. And let me tell you, the internet has absolutely done a number on this one. It's become the go-to label for anyone who is selfish, self-absorbed, or just not very nice. But true clinical narcissism is far more complex and far rarer than the internet would have you believe. Here's what narcissistic personality disorder actually is. A pervasive pattern of grandiosity in fantasy or behaviour, a desperate insatiable need for admiration, and a profound life-altering lack of empathy. It begins by early adulthood and shows up in a variety of contexts. It's not just taking too many selfies, it's a fundamental distortion of the self. Let me give you the core traits of NPD. A grandiose sense of self-importance. They genuinely believe they are special, unique, and can only be understood by other special, high-status people. They don't just think they're good, they think they're exceptional, one of a kind, a gift to the world. They're preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. They're constantly imagining themselves as the hero of the story, the star of the film, the centre of the universe. They believe they are special and expect to associate only with other high-status people and institutions. They name drop, they status drop, they make sure you know exactly how important they are. They have a need for excessive admiration. They need you to tell them that they're brilliant constantly, like emotional vampires who feed on praise. Your admiration is their oxygen. They have a sense of entitlement. They expect favourable treatment, automatic compliance with their expectations, and get genuinely outraged when they don't get it. They're interpersonally exploitative. They take advantage of others to achieve their own ends without guilt or hesitation. You exist to serve them. They lack empathy. They cannot or will not recognise the feelings and needs of others. Your feelings are an inconvenience. They envy others or believe that others are envious of them. They're constantly comparing, constantly ranking, constantly measuring. The world is a competition and they have to be winning. And they have arrogant, haughty behaviours or attitudes. They look down on you and they want you to know it. Now here's the crucial thing about narcissists that the internet often misses. Underneath that grandiose, arrogant, I'm better than you exterior is something incredibly fragile. A narcissist's self-esteem is like a soap bubble. It looks impressive, shiny, iridescent, floating beautifully above everyone else, but it will pop at the slightest touch. A single criticism, a single perceived slight, a single moment of not being treated like the most important person in the room, and when that bubble pops, the person underneath is devastated. They need constant external validation to maintain their sense of self. If you criticise them, even gently, even constructively, even with love, they can't handle it. They might lash out in a narcissistic rage. or they might collapse into shame and withdrawal, or they might devalue you entirely. Their entire identity is built on a foundation of sand, and they need you to keep telling them the sand is actually marble. This is the tragic irony of narcissistic personality disorder. It's not just loving yourself too much, it's having so little genuine, authentic, unshakable self-worth that you have to construct an entire fantasy world in which you're the most important person alive. And anyone who threatens that fantasy is a threat to be destroyed. Now, is NPD treatable? It's very, very difficult. For the same reason psychopathy is difficult to treat. The person with NPD rarely believes they have a problem. Everyone else is the problem. You're too sensitive. You're just jealous. Why would they seek help when they're obviously the best person in the world? Therapy requires self-awareness. It requires the ability to say, I have a problem and I want to change. And that's the one thing a narcissist cannot do. Right, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the internet diagnosis epidemic. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, Facebook, everywhere you look. Someone is explaining the signs you're dating a narcissist. Someone is listing the traits of a psychopath. Someone is telling you to cut off toxic people and go no contact with anyone who's ever made you feel bad. It's a digital army of armchair psychologists armed with pop psychology terms and zero clinical training, and they are diagnosing everyone. And on one hand, I get it. The language of mental health is finally out in the open. We're talking about things we used to hide. We're recognising toxic patterns. We're empowering people to leave bad relationships. That's genuinely good. That's progress. But on the other hand, and this is a big but, we've gone too far. We've overcorrected. We've taken 3 clinical terms that describe serious, rare and complex personality disorders, and we've diluted them into buzzwords that now just mean person who was mean to me, and that dilution has real, serious, harmful consequences. First, it stigmatises people with actual personality disorders. People who are suffering, people who need help, people who didn't choose to be this way. Second, it trivialises the experience of people who have genuinely been abused by someone with a clinical condition. And third, it makes it harder for people to recognise the real thing, because everyone around them is using the same language for far less serious behaviour. When every ex is a psychopath, how do you warn someone about an actual psychopath? And honestly, most of the time when someone says, my ex was a narcissist, what they actually mean is, my ex was selfish, my ex was emotionally unavailable, my ex didn't care about my needs, my ex was a crap partner. And those are valid reasons to leave someone. You don't need to diagnose them with a personality disorder to justify leaving. You can just leave. You can say, this person didn't treat me well and I deserve better. No clinical diagnosis required. Here's the cold truth. Genuine narcissists are about 1% of the population. Psychopaths and sociopaths combined are maybe 1 to 3%. That means roughly 97% of the population are just regular people who are sometimes selfish, sometimes thoughtless, sometimes bad at relationships. And the internet has convinced us that every single one of them is a clinical case study. So how do you spot the real thing? The key is pattern, severity and lack of insight. It's not one argument, it's not one selfish act, it's a lifetime of behaviour. It's a complete inability to take responsibility, to feel genuine remorse, to see things from another person's perspective. And if you try to talk to them about it, they will genuinely not understand. Not because they're choosing not to, because they can't. And also, remember Dr. Taylor? The diagnosed psychopath who is now a life coach, because even the most stigmatised condition in the world doesn't define a person. Even the diagnosis everyone fears doesn't make someone a monster. And if we can hold on to that, if we can remember that human beings are more than their diagnoses, we might just be able to have a conversation about personality disorders that's grounded in compassion, not just fear. So let's recap. Psychopaths are born, sociopaths are made, narcissists are protecting a fragile ego the size of a planet. And not every difficult person you've ever met has a personality disorder. Some people are just a bit shit, and that's okay. You're allowed to dislike someone without diagnosing them. You're allowed to leave a relationship without medicalising it. And also, and this is the part I really want you to remember, even the most stigmatised conditions don't define a person. Dr. Lewis Raymond Taylor is a diagnosed psychopath, and he's a life coach. He helps people. He's proof that a diagnosis is not a destiny, that a brain wired differently is still capable of choice, contribution, and good. And that is a story worth telling over and over until the stigma starts to crack. If this resonated with you, if you're tired of the internet calling everyone a narcissist, or if Dr. Taylor's story blew your mind the way it blew mine, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. The links are in the show notes. Tell me your thoughts, tell me your stories, tell me the most ridiculous thing someone's ever tried to diagnose their ex with. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who might need it. Word of mouth is how small shows like this one grow. Until next time, be kind to your brain, be careful with the language you use, and please, for the love of all that is holy, stop diagnosing your ex. This is Anxiously Ever After. I'm Jenny,